as I sit here and I'm watching the NBA Cup championship game, the
Oh,
Emirates, the
brother.
Emirates Cup, NBA Cup between the Bucks and the Thunder. Malika Andrews is addressing controversy, not major controversy, small troll controversy, that she has an axe to grind against black athletes. She has had to deal with assertions that she feels some type of way about black athletes and people's belief as such. And I shared the wrong page there. People's belief that she is anti-black athlete or that she has issues when it comes to black athletes is rooted in people's perception that she goes way harder on being critical of black athletes, and she does not give the same energy to non-black athletes. And she is recently addressing those criticisms, saying that they are unfounded and that she is merely doing her job. So this says Malika Andrews on untrue criticisms of her coverage of black players. Malika Andrews has cleared the air and addressed the criticisms regarding her coverage of black athletes, particularly in the NBA, during a sit-down conversation with DeMar DeRozan on his new show, Dinners with DeMar. The NBA Countdown and NBA Today host reflected on the rumors that fans have conjured up that she's biased when covering black NBA stars. Throughout her tenure with ESPN, Andrews has made some interesting criticisms of black athletes and their off the court issues. One of the first was her on-air argument with Stephen A. Smith about Houston Rockets head coach Ime Udoka having an extramarital affair with a team staffer while he worked for the Boston Celtics. Andrews also made headlines when covering Charlotte Hornets' Brandon Miller being involved in a shooting incident and her perceived lack of interest in fully reporting on the Chicago Bulls' Josh Giddey being accused of having sexual relations with an underage girl. According to Andrews, the rumors of her being biased with her coverage of NBA stars couldn't be any further from the truth. Andrews said she does her best to lead with empathy when covering the NBA, but she is also aware that there is a job that has to get done, which isn't to drag these athletes through the mud as most people think. You've heard me say this before. I always say I'm going to be two things. I want to be accurate and I want to be fair, said Andrews. And if I'm not one of those two things, you might not always like me, but this is my number. Please call me. And people have called and they've said that. I also say that oftentimes, especially before I'm talking to folks about something that is sensitive or tough, because these things come up and it is hurtful. I think that's okay to say sometimes it hurts, even if it doesn't matter. If it is someone who is credible or someone with a big platform, or if it's someone in their mom's basement just firing off a post. Sometimes it is hurtful when that seeps through, particularly for me when it's not true, right? Or that's been the hardest part for me sometimes is stomaching the falsehoods, particularly, this you hate black men or think that. That couldn't be farther from the truth. And using my family or the way that my family looks as some sort of evidence of that, and that is just untrue and it's just unkind. We all have jobs to do, and I have to do my best to show up every day in a way that you guys know what I'm about. Trolls have used Andrew's mixed race family background to fuel their beliefs that she's out to get black NBA stars. Her marriage to fellow ESPN reporter Dave McMenamin, a white man, amplified people even more too. Is that the end of it? Yeah, that's the
Yep.
end of it. So yeah, so there you go. She's defending herself against the idea that she has an extra grind towards black athletes, and people have used her family dynamics and marital status as evidence of the like. So what do you make about her coming to her own defense, saying that it's not true and she always strives to be fair and accurate, even if it is at times unkind?
You know, I I hear her point. Um, she may not personally feel that way. Okay, but she's right. She has a job to do. They're the ones who ESPN. They're the ones who feed her the lines and what to say, and she says what's being given to her. And I think the problem here is a bigger problem because people did notice that, and I was on the ground floor watching all of this stuff go down with the Brandon Miller situation, on the ground floor of YouTube, watching all the content that was, targeting Malika Andrews about all of this stuff. Then when the Josh Giddey situation was floating around, because it was floating around and it was enough to speak on it. Now, whether things are whatever, but that's what ESPN typically does, is they speak on things that are going on. And they were pretty much silent about that situation. And then the flip side about all of that was, hey man, if there's a brother going through this situation, we would have heard about it by now. And that's all speculation, people could say. But I was one of the people that was like, yeah man, well, where is it? Where I'm always hearing all about all this other stuff. So Malika, yeah, she might not personally, because and that's like saying that all those anchors are up there saying what they want to say, but they're not saying what they want to say. Yes, these words are coming out of their mouths, but these are talking points that are given to them and provided to them. And sometimes you need a particular face in order to promote whatever your agenda is. Yeah, and so in this situation, Malika Andrews is just the latest person who has, it doesn't sound like she has any particular knowledge about the game that's substantial. She may know of the sport, she may know the players, but for her to be in this position and talking about the sports stuff, like, I was never really a fan of it. And then once I saw that she was doing all of this stuff by bringing up things, because once Brandon Miller got drafted, I was there. I was like, what is she gonna say? Is she gonna talk about that stuff? Sure enough, she did. So yeah, man. So when something else happens, people are gonna be watching to see if she's gonna say something or whatever, because she has that rep now, and whether she likes it or not, part of her job description is to do this. And if it doesn't, I don't think it's a situation where people are reaching. I think this is a situation where, because there's predominantly more black people in the NBA, and people say that, and predominantly black people are getting more in trouble. So there's something more to report, and people could say all these other things or whatever. But there's a reason why when I walk down the street, women clutch their purse. I didn't do anything to them. There's a perception that's been promoted through all forms of media that just because you're black, you're violent. And these are coming from somewhere, even in sports situations. So whenever they choose to report on certain things, they're reporting on certain things about certain people. And it spans across all types of art forms and all kinds of media. So Malika Andrews is an agent of it, in the sense that she is a person that gives the information, but she's not the one that has that mindset, whether it's intentional or not. Because, and again, somebody could sit here and say, oh yeah, whoop, whoop. But the reason why people honk their alarm when I'm walking in the parking lot, I ain't about to jack their car. I just park mine. But the reason why they're doing that is that latent fear that they have for whatever reason. Those people are on the boards of certain things, and that fear comes out through certain forms of whatever. And in the sports thing, it comes out with using somebody like a Malika Andrews to spew that same type of fear-based conversation points. So a lot to say there. So yeah, she can wipe her hands and say that I personally don't have nothing against black athletes or whatever. That's fine. But you are the conduit to it. You are the person that is being used as the vessel to spew whatever somebody else has filling in these boardrooms. At least that's what I think. But what are your thoughts, sir, on Malika Andrews saying that, hey, man, I don't have anything against black athletes, and it's hurtful and all of this stuff to say that about me, lousy splees. But what are your thoughts, man?
I'm going to defend her a little bit. So here's what I'll say. And I don't know whether she's doing that or not. I'm not in her head. I don't know if she does feel some type of way about black athletes or not. I don't know. Whether the manner in which she has done her job from time to time has perpetuated certain low hanging fruits, perhaps, maybe, but I'm willing to go so far as to say she didn't realize it. I think she, and I don't know her. That's the thing. Like these types of conversations to me are a bit uncomfortable because, like, I don't really she doesn't I don't like I don't know what she's done personally. I don't know what she does outside of being an anchor on ESPN, so I don't have anything to juxtapose her on air behavior to be able to make any sort of definitive conclusion on how she might be leaning one way or the other when it comes to certain issues. She might be one of these individuals that truly doesn't see color. Like she might live a non-racial existence, meaning she operates in her life and she doesn't really look at, see, feel, or believe that race is a factor in her immediate reality. And when you don't see race at all in your reality, you're not going to have any sort of you know, inclination that saying this in this particular way or tone or doing this is going to incite some sort of a feeling or attitude or belief because for her she just doesn't see race at all. And I've heard other people say something like Lil Wayne got dragged for years for being on Undisputed that one time and saying he doesn't see race. And people were just like, how can you say that? What do you mean you don't see race as a black person? How do you not see race? They just couldn't believe that he would make those kinds of comments. And we can go back and forth about where that would come from in terms of why he would say such a thing. I'm pretty sure there are all sorts of societal observations that we can look at to try and deduce where that would come from and why he would say it. But at the end of the day, he believes that. And so, him believing that sort of informs one on why he might say or do certain things from time to time. And I feel as though she may have been ignorant towards the kind of sentiment that her coverage of Brandon Miller would invoke because she doesn't really look at life through a racial lens. And if you look at her family dynamic, I wouldn't be shocked at all if she really looked at the world that way. She's biracial, her sister's biracial, she has a white husband. Like her whole family dynamic and her immediate reality is one in which race isn't really a thing that's beaten into her skull on a day-to-day basis, I would imagine, throughout her upbringing or throughout her come up. So maybe it's a situation where she just doesn't really see it like that. And I don't so I said that I'm going to defend her. I'm not really. That's not really a defense, more so than a pseudo psychoanalyzation, if that makes sense. Not
Mhm.
necessarily a defense, but sort of my way of kind of trying to get into her head somewhat to try and get a better understanding as to why she would feel as though she can't understand why people would feel that way, despite the fact that she's said some of these things, while doing her job. But one thing that I will truly defend her on is the idea that people can assert that because she's biracial or has a white husband, that means she does have an issue with black athletes. I'm not very comfortable with that. I'm uncomfortable with that idea, just like I'm uncomfortable with the idea that if you are a black person and you happen to marry someone who's not black, it means that you're disqualified from participating in black conversations. It means that you are disqualified from contributing to helping black people, that your opinion on black issues doesn't matter because you're not with a person who's black. The Umar Johnson rhetoric, personally, I'm uncomfortable with that. Like I don't think that a person who lived a black existence for 25, 30, 40 years but married a person who's not black means that that person therefore is into perpetuity disqualified from participating in black conversations. I don't agree with that. I'm sure there are a lot of people who do, and we'll just have to agree to disagree. I don't agree with that. And I do think that there's an element of this where people look at her being biracial and look at the fact that she's married to a white guy, and they automatically assume, therefore by default, that she does have an issue with black athletes because of that. And I don't like that. I don't like that. I mean, you can use other evidence or other observations about her character or her behavior to make those assumptions if you want to go that far. But to summarily conclude that because she's married to a white guy and she's biracial, which she had no control over, she had no control over being biracial. Like
Mm-hmm.
she couldn't be not biracial. She was born that way. She couldn't help that.
Mm-hmm.
So to take that as an anchor, or rather to take that as your way to anchor yourself in your belief that she has an axe to grind against black athletes, to me is unreasonable. So that's where I will come to her defense, because I'm uncomfortable with that. Just like I'm uncomfortable with the idea or the notion that if you don't marry a black person, that it means you can't be a part of or contribute to the ongoing conversation around the black quote unquote community. I just fundamentally I disagree with that stance. So from that standpoint, I will come to her defense. But overall, I do think that maybe part of the way that she looks at this and why she's going to defend herself against those accusations or those claims is maybe in her own world, she doesn't really see race like that. And there's people who look at the world that way, right or wrong, fair or unfair. I'm not here to agree or disagree with it, but it's a situation where certain people, based upon their experiences and their own upbringing, don't necessarily look at race as a determining factor of everything that they do and say. And maybe she's one of those people. It is what it is, but I do think that people need to back off of the idea that it's 100% on the board that she's against black athletes just because she's biracial. I don't think that's fair. Like, she couldn't help how she was born. But I do think that people do that. And I do think she has the right to defend herself against stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. That's a fair take. I would say that on the flip side of that, going back to my argument was that this is something that's bigger than Malika Andrews, and Malika Andrews is just a pawn in a larger systemic way of viewing particular types of athletes. Now, Stephen A. Smith will consider himself the blackest of black. He went to an HBCU. He hires black people. He hires brothers and all this other stuff and all this other stuff here. But he also has a reputation and a stigma floating around his name for throwing our types of athletes under the bus. And many people would argue that the only reason why he's in that position and whatever is to be a mouthpiece to throw certain brothers up under the bus. Kyrie Irving, for instance. Even then, he would have to double back and apologize and say all his other stuff and double talk and all these other things. But he does have his place, Stephen A. Smith, as well. All right. Anybody like not Shannon Sharp, godly Al Sharpton or something like that, who's got a speaking, a mouthpiece, and he's on all types of networks and stuff, talking or whatever, and saying what he's got to say. He's as black as it gets. He's not biracial at all. All right. And but yet and still he's there to hopscotch and pander and do all these other things that do not serve the best interests of particular communities. This whole dynamic with biracialisms and stuff. Hey man, I'm not judging nobody for being born. All right. Hey, I didn't choose to be black. I was just this way. And for somebody that's biracial or whatever, hey man, that was your parents' decision, not yours. So I'm not here to judge you in that capacity either. But the whole mindset of not seeing race and not seeing color, I wish that was a true thing. But in all actuality, people are making decisions based on the fact that they claim they don't see color. And whenever they're saying that is a way to just do something with another color of people. And so and my thing is with that, and it's not that there's anything wrong with that, but nobody's better because they claim that they don't see a particular color. Is my point. Nobody's
Well,
better because of that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's my thought. Because you could still see color because I do see a color when I see that person. I still could. There's still something in that where I can still see another color, and still treat that person like a human being if that person is treating me like a human being. And so there's nothing wrong with seeing color in that capacity. And because other groups of people see color, those people are communal. Those people are taking care of each other. Those people create jobs and hire each other because they see color. The same people that we're claiming that we don't see color with or whatever, they're doing that. They see color. And we're the only people running around here saying that we don't see color because we're trying to amalgamate with everybody else that nobody and everybody kicks us out. So in that point, people have to change their entire mindset. They have to change everything that they're about because they're trying to promote this ideology that, hey man, I don't see color. I don't see color. I don't see color so much that I'm not going to associate with things that are historically of my people. And I'm not talking about rap. I'm not talking about a particular type of clothes or anything like that. I'm talking about a particular type of mindset that was traditional before people were put on boats. So the only thing that the point I'm trying to get at, so I'm not getting at her race or biracial, even though other people may, but none of my talking points had anything to do with her biracialism, her marrying a white man. Everything, all of my talking points had everything to do with a larger system that has historically have been talking about our people in a particular light. And then they have understood the science because the rest of the world sees color to hire a person that has color to talk about those people that are colored. So they don't look crazy because now there's this cancel culture of who's this white person talking about all these black athletes. So they fixed that by hiring Stephen A. Smith. They fixed that by hiring whoever else. And so this has nothing to do with the people, the pawns on the chessboard that are out there for everybody to throw stones at. It's for the people who put those pieces on the board and are moving those pieces whenever an event happens. So yes, I agree with Malika. She probably doesn't individually have a problem with black people. But my issue isn't with her. It's with the ESPNs of the world, those types of things that are perpetuating certain types of stereotypes. And yes, those guys did it. I'm not saying, I'm not trying to whatever those guys got going on. But the pattern that the internet recognized it shouldn't be something that should be dismissed. I think it should be something that should be looked at and understood, because I don't think these guys are overreaching whenever they're saying these things. So she's just the product of this. All right. So yeah, no shade per se to Malika. All right. But yeah, pawns are pawns, and Stephen A. Smith is one as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. I just think at the end of the day, basketball and football are by far the most popular sports in this country. And each of those respective sports have 70% black athlete participation.
Yeah,
So odds are that anytime there is an incident, it's going to involve a black person. I
yeah.
mean, when I look, whenever anything goes down with any of these people who participate in any of these sports, there's coverage. Like I can't in good faith, cop to the idea that they lean into one particular athlete over the other on the grounds of race, because right now the idea, like this is like all about ideologues and ideology. So we've moved on from race and we're now fully talking about domestic disputes. We're talking about gender inequality. We're talking about all of these ideologies. We're talking about, so anything that transgresses along those lines, whoever the perp is, they're going to get talked about, regardless of what their color is. More often than not, if we're talking about basketball and football, it is what it is, man. I hear what you're saying, and I agree with that. I think the machine at work works across the board, though. I just think people care less about soccer and baseball and tennis. So those transgressors get to fly under the radar because what moves the needle is basketball and football. And each of those sports have 70% black players.
Well, and that's why everybody was just looking at the Josh Giddey situation, and that's why the article mentioned it. That's because that's what the internet was mentioning.
I will say this though. I'm not trying to defend all of this stuff.
Yeah, I got you.
But just being honest, because I do watch this stuff every day. They were talking about Josh Giddey. So like I never really understood the idea that no one's talking about Josh Giddey, because I was watching all of these shows and people was bringing up Josh Giddey. Even if it was to bring up Josh Giddey to say, let's make sure we talk about Josh Giddey the same way we talk about everybody else. But I was watching a lot of these shows and Josh Giddey was getting brought up. So it's not, I mean, I don't recall that. I think that's a bit of revisionist history because I remember people talking about Josh Giddey. I just feel as though at this point, we have worshiped at the altar of basketball and football. And because we worship at the altar of basketball and football, and that's what moves the needle, that's what drives the ratings, that's what people pay the most attention to. What we're going to be talking about, therefore, more often than not, is basketball players and football players. And you're looking at 70, 75%. So the numbers just bear witness to this being the case. I don't like it any more than the next person, but I say there needs to be a more balanced representation in terms of how we talk about this stuff overall. But it is what it is. This is just the kind of stuff that we see because that's what's being talked about the most. And again, when it comes to the whole not seeing color thing, that was me. I'm not saying Malika does that. I am saying perhaps that's kind of how she looks at the world. But what I do think is a real thing is people from the community who will take a person's comments and they will inform themselves on how they feel about that person's comments based upon their familial background and their meritage history and their meritage status and those various dynamics. So it's like, how do I feel about the fact that, I don't know, how do I feel about the fact that, like, who's someone who's like blacker than black? Like, how do I feel about the fact that Michael Wilbon talked about this? Like if Michael Wilbon talks about Brandon Miller, and then Malika Andrews talks about Brandon Miller, I think it's on the board that that same person is going to perceive those comments differently, even if they're talking about it in the same way, because there's a perception that Michael Wilbon is this and Malika Andrews is this. And the difference in the perception is based on the fact that she's married to a white person and is biracial. And in my opinion, that is unreasonable because if they're saying the exact same thing, you have to treat it in the exact same way. Don't look at Wilbon's comments any differently because you don't perceive him to be the biracial married to a white woman person that you perceive Malika Andrews to be. Look at it all the same. And I do think we have a tendency to do that. So I just wanted to bring that up because I think that particular element of the conversation is unfair to people like Andrews. And so that's pretty much where I was coming at it with that.
I got you, man. So we'll see. This is a nuanced conversation, but I would just say this, man. I hear your point. The reason why Malika Andrews catches a lot of flack is because, well, she's not really good at her job, and she's not good TV, and so a lot of people feel like she just got this position because of her aesthetics.
I don't even think prior to this she even did sports.
Yeah,
like one time I was looking up her professional history. I don't even think before ESPN she was even doing sports.
So she was catching bullets for that. I mean, all these guys, all these black guys that are talking crap about, they all hit. It's not that they're not attracted to her. It's not that none of that stuff. So her race or biracialism, nobody sees that. I would say
people see it, they bring it. Otherwise, they wouldn't bring it up.
But what I'm getting at is people, they still treat her as black. They still call her black. They feel like you are being black. Like my thing is with this whole thing is that her criticism came from her just being thrust in everybody's face, and people are okay. Well, who the hell is this? And she was catching criticisms for that, alone. And so and that followed her. Hell, I didn't even like Rachel Nichols back in the day, but she was doing it for so long. I was like, I guess she can host this or whatever. But even somebody like a Rachel Nichols or whatever, but somebody like Wilbon, for instance, just because it was brought up or whatever. I mean, that guy has a track record and a history of being around these sports or whatever. But Malika, she was just like, why are you talking about these sports? You're talking about these sports like you're not about these sports. So, she was always catching stuff for that. And it's just, and again, it's just the way that these situations, the way and how it got brought up. All right. When it was some brother that died or whatever, and instead of just talking about him passing away, she wanted to bring up his criminal background. when Brandon Miller's getting drafted, you know, best day of his life or whatever, they want to talk about his criminal background. That was his case was dismissed. We didn't need to bring that up. You know, it was the context in which it was brought up. And that's why people was like, why? And she's the one that's doing it. But again, it's not her. It's the people that tell her to say these things. It's on the teleprompter. She didn't write that. So my issue isn't with Malika Andrews. People may have an issue with Malika Andrews, but my thing is when, and I just did the thing right now. All right. Google or whatever. I just Googled five black males, 5 black teens. All right. You're gonna see a lot of mug shots and a lot of gang stuff. And if you type in 5 white males, 5 white teens, you don't get that. You get, whatever. And my thing is that when that mindset permeates past a Google search, and it's always being promoted. So when athletes say, yeah, and that's why I brought up in my initial thing, like, yeah, man, people can argue that there's more black players in these sports, or whatever. But my thing is that the reason why people are seeing and saying these things is because of the context in which they were brought up, and why you got to bring up these guys' criminal stuff when they got this stuff going on or whatever. It has nothing. It's unrelated. But when a player has something active going on or whatever, and y'all talking about some countdown or whatever, and some whatever, people would want to hear that. Then that's when people was like, hey, I'm all ears now. We're not talking about something that got acquitted. Let's hear it. And it wasn't coming about. So again, she's just a lightning rod for this situation. I don't think it's her per se. I think it's just people noticing these things that are paying attention to those things. So, hey, man, I hear your points, man. All valid. I just think that there's different ways to look at this situation. And yeah, man, I'm one of the people that were, like, hey, man, I want this to be fair and balanced. Because she went in on Udoka. Like she went in on his ass.
Yeah, that's because she's a woman. Now the Udoka thing, that was her being a woman and her feeling some type of way about a man cheating on a woman. That's what that was. And she got all emotional on that because she's a woman.
Yeah.
And she felt some type of way because this dirty man cheated on his wife, blah, blah, blah. That's where that came from. I mean, I just think that we are now in the era of ideology, and I don't think it matters who the person is. I think it's easy for us to get sucked into the notion that there is a racial element at play, but there's a racial element at play by default because we're talking about professional sports and black dominated leagues. But if you consume enough media, people are doing this everywhere. Like there's some white actor who is like, up for a role, and people are immediately bringing up some issue that he had 10 years ago, some he said, or he hit somebody or did this or did that, and people are bringing it up. Like, I think the media feels as though it's the media is no longer doing unbiased news reporting. The media now does opinionated, opining, ideological reporting. And that's what I think is permeating all forms of media, not just sports. If the only form of media that you're consuming is ESPN or sports, it's easy to say this is going on. Yeah. But if you look at any of these entertainment shows, if you read any of these entertainment blogs, or if you watch any of this other stuff, if you're on social media, there's some random guy and it's like, oh, this movie is going to have this guy. Oh, this guy did this 10 years ago. Let's talk about that. Just to stir up the controversy and question whether he deserves to get it. Should he get fired? Is the production studio doing the right thing by like, this is going on everywhere. And I don't like it. Because again, it takes me back to the Chris Brown thing. You want people to suffer into perpetuity? Like, it's ridiculous. Like, unless something is actively taking place, why bring it up? But I feel like it's going on everywhere. So I think we can agree to disagree on this one, which is cool. But I definitely I think it does happen, but I think it's happening in media in general, not just with sports. Because the media is now weird. It's no longer impartial reporting and let's just talk about the facts. It's all opinion based. It's people talking about opinions, and opinions always come from a personal place rooted in some form of ideology. It's never about reporting or being unbiased. So,
Yeah.
and yeah, she's an agent. She's not the one. She's in the position to deliver the commentary, but I think the idea that that is a type of commentary that needs to be delivered comes from this overall landscape of media reporting that is completely stoked in ideology.
Okay, I can hear that. I can get with that.
Yeah. That one went a lot longer than I thought it would. But
Hey man, thanks, Malika.
shouts out to Malika Andrews, man. You
Yeah,
know,
and DeMar DeRozan. God damn, another podcaster. Yeah,
yeah,
muddy in the waters, bro.
yeah.
Yeah,
I feel you on Malika though. She's whatever. Like, she can stand to get better at her job for sure.
I
You
would
know.
say that. Be more entertaining.